This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.
And welcome back, everybody. Many of us not big fans of change. We like to keep things the way they are just because it's safer that way. It's more comfortable, but newsflash, life changes. Life is always changing. Got to be prepared for it, especially when it comes to planning your financial future and what are you going to do with your assets, especially when life changes. Let's say kids come along. Let's say you get married again. Just some of those pretty common changes. Your estate needs to get a little bit of attention when those changes come up. So we're going to talk about that today. She is an estate attorney, and she's fantastic taking this information and making it so we can easily understand it. Julie Schejbal, back on the program. How are you doing today?
I'm great, Stephen. Thank you for the kind introduction. It's always appreciated.
Well, it's heartfelt, and I'm right there, looking as I even scanned the last 2 years of changes that have come up. Right. And, the first thing that comes to my mind is when you have, let's say you are proactive and you have a plan for your assets and your estate and everything, and then changes come along. How fast should you adapt to those changes within your estate? Now, we're going to look at all different scenarios, but that's the first one that comes to mind. Let's say, I'm getting married next month, second marriage. Things are kind of been a little etched in stone with my estate. How long should somebody wait after a life change to change their estate?
So I think the first thing is I recommend generally that clients review their documents the shorter of 5 years or a major life event. So that's sort of a time frame when you have things in place, what you should do. But I think if it's a major life event like a marriage, a second marriage, then you really want to be a little more proactive because, or divorce. So start with the first part. Second marriage, you probably got divorced. We may want to be even quicker because you may find out that your documents left everything to your ex-wife or your ex-husband's sweetheart, and that may not be where you want it to go. Now, I believe that once you're divorced, it will sever those ties, but let's not wait on the statute. Let's get that cleaned up. Let's remove him or her, clean up our beneficiary designations for life insurance and retirement money to make sure the ex-spouse is not on there. And then when you're looking at a second marriage, you also want to be proactive because, maybe you redid your will when you got the divorce. Now everything's going to, at that point, maybe everything went to your kids. Well, now you're remarried. Maybe you want to make provisions for your current spouse, the current love of your life, and that's understandable. You want to make sure he or she is taken care of. But under the will, you've left everything to the kids. So you would want to update your docs to reflect your new situation. And that can be driven, by, if you had a prenup, by this prenup, you're going to want to make sure there's provisions that take care of anything you put in your prenup, or I'm just making sure that assets go to your kids, to the wife. And then the other thing you have is with a second marriage, remember, I think Walt Disney made a fortune with movies about the evil stepmother. So you want to, at the same time, you have this like yin and yang of I want to protect my new husband or wife, but I also want to make sure that my kids will benefit at the end of the day. And so you want to be careful to not just say, hey, I leave everything outright to my current spouse, because outright goes in their pocket. It's theirs to do what they want. And that means if you die first, they can, cut your kids out, whether that's intentionally. I never liked his or her kids. Now's my chance to get rid of them, or unintentionally. And what I mean by unintentionally is the one spouse dies, the survivor goes into maybe an attorney or pulls something off of Wills R Us or whatever and says, yeah, I'm going to just, when I die, everything goes to my kids. Well, your kids aren't the second spouse's kids, right? They're the stepchildren. So if it just says to my children, you run this risk of them being cut out, even though that was not the intention, like sloppy drafting.
You said prenup. I didn't even think of that. That's another one that, a consideration. You did refer to some of those online, call them cookie cutter, legal
Right.
document portals that you pay for. What's some of the things that we should be mindful, even looking at those, where things could, I'm not putting words in your mouth, but, fall through the cracks, things like that. What are your thoughts
Well,
on those?
I think it's again, it goes back to something you learn in law school that a person who's their own attorney has a fool for a client. But I think you have to be careful because those uh, prep uh, things are only as good as the input that you put in. So,
Hmm.
it's kind of like when you if you use a tax prep program for your income taxes. If
Right.
your income taxes are pretty straightforward, it will do everything correctly. If they get more complicated, you're going to botch it. And it's the same type of thing with the will. And you may, make a left turn where you should make a right turn, and you're not going to know where, that you made the wrong turn. It's going to spit something out, and then your kids or whoever comes after you is going to find out, wow, that was the wrong way to do things,
Hmm.
and boom, too late to change it.
Yes, and especially when we don't know what info to input. Yes, it's going to hold your
Right.
hand along the way, but there could be other pieces floating out there that it's unaware of. So it's not going to
Right.
ask you. Where when you're working with somebody, you you do a full intake, get the full big picture, and there might be
Exactly.
little pieces floating out there. Same thing with your taxes.
Right.
Fantastic if you got a simple situation. Uh, when I was 22, that was a simple situation.
Exactly.
You know, as life goes on, there's so many different moving pieces.
Exactly.
Hmm. Wow. What else can you tell us about planning for changes in our life? What are some of the other changes we talked about? Second marriage, maybe kids coming along. What else is floating out there?
So with your kids, there's two types of changes that you're going to hit. When you first have the children, in your plan, you're going to prepare for these kids being little, and you
Hmm.
want to make sure that, hey, they have a guardian, there's somebody in place that's going to raise them, that and make sure that's the appropriate person. Because if you don't have that in your will, you're leaving it up to a fight after you die, and generally leaving it up to the vagary of the court, which may
Hmm.
not be the best solution. And then the second part is planning for your money. You're going to have these little kids, and you're going to have, if you die, particularly you're younger, you're carrying a lot of life insurance. All of a sudden, there's a lot of money available to your little children. And that's one of the things we talk about in estate planning for younger couples, is making sure that there's documents in place, that there's a trust in your will to hold that money for your kids till they get to be older and more capable of handling the money. Because if you don't have this, the state of Maryland, and I think every other state in the country, says your kids are going to get that money at 18.
Hmm.
So whether you have a dime or $1 million or whatever, it goes to the kids. And I don't know. I haven't met too many 18-year-olds with 18-year-old friends who are capable of handling a lot of money.
Um, my dad passed away when I was 21. Got a
Uh-huh.
little, we got a little bit of money. Sudden passing. What's the first thing I bought? Red sports car.
Exactly. Well, yeah, exactly.
And, I'm good with that, but that
Right.
was the mentality now. Then, if it was
Yeah,
now, I wouldn't be thinking that. There would be other things I would put financial priority on.
exactly. And it's one thing to get enough money to buy a sports car, which is a nice thing. I'm not, being
Sure, sure.
critical or casting judgment, but it's another thing if all of a sudden, 7 or 8 figures lands in your lap and you mess that up, because that can be life change, if not totally life changing money, that gives you that big leg up in life,
Yeah, yeah.
and
But truth be told, I'm very transparent. That's about all
yeah,
the money that I received from his
right.
passing. I didn't save any. We went all
Yeah,
into the car. So you're right, about 18, 19, 20, whatever. Um,
right.
let's look at, let's say, a divorce. It finally becomes final,
Yep.
and you haven't done anything yet. what would be, and let's say you check out from life and you have some assets. What would happen at that point? And you have kids. What would happen at
Yeah.
that point?
So when you said it's finally become final, you didn't have any will in place at all. Is that what
That's what
I'm
I'm
saying?
saying. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So what would happen is you would be deemed to have died intestate. So what would happen? Divorce is final, then it would go to your children, and if they are under 18, it's going to be subject to a guardianship, which is where you go into court. Somebody's appointed as the guardian of the property. They're going to handle the money, and they're basically in charge of the money. And every year, with the under the guardianship, they have to report to the court. This is what happened with the money. This is how it was spent. This is how it was invested. And often the courts will put, with in terms of investment, they will put restrictions on how the money can be invested. So you may be stuck in the FDIC insured world, which is certainly safe, but the return isn't going to be as good.
Mm,
And I'm not suggesting your return should be, in crypto or anything like that, but certainly between crypto and FDIC insured, there's a span of things that could be invested that give you a better rate of return.
sure.
And then the other thing is, if they need to spend money on things, the needs to spend money on things that as a parent you would have done, computers, tutors, class trip to Italy, whatever, they have to ask the court for permission to spend that money. So it's restrictive and cumbersome. And then the worst thing is at 18, regardless of what's left, it goes to your children. So there could be $100 in that pot or, several million, and those kids get it. And then there's the sports car, but also probably not only the sports car, you might be buying sports cars for all your friends or,
Yeah, yes.
you know, traveling, with
Mm,
them, say, hey, let's all go to, Jamaica for spring break. And there's
right,
nothing
right.
wrong with Jamaica, but it's kind of pricey to spend it for all of your friends.
I think I took a little bit of the leftover money and did go on spring break
Yeah,
to
there you go.
Florida. Not
Right.
kidding. Um,
Yeah.
can you designate an age? So let's say, your kids are under 18 and you want them getting your assets if you pass at a certain age. Is that permissible?
Absolutely. So we do this in wills all the time for parents with young children as we set up a trust. It's a testamentary trust, meaning the terms and conditions are in your will, but it's just paper till you die and then it's set up. And often we say, that children will get it like in layers. So they might get income at 21. So if there's $2
Huh?
million in the trust, spins off 5%, they get 100,000 to do what they want. And then half of the principal at 25 and half at 30, or the parents have control over the ages. So they might say 30 and 35 or 30, 35, 40, whatever they think is appropriate so that where their kids will be older, smarter, and I guess able to handle the money. Because the other thing is the trust is a spendthrift trust. And what that means is that it's exempt from claims of your children's creditors, credit
Hmm.
card issues, gambling issues. Maybe they got married and divorced early. It's protected,
Wow.
so you're giving them also these layers to get, older and smarter, I think.
What I'm deducing here, Julie, from all of this is you really have a lot of flexibility and control in terms of what you want to do within your will, your agreements, all of that.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
It's sort of, and I mean, I think there's a lot of flexibility. You have a lot of control. At the same time, we work with clients to um, kind of bend the flexibilities right or bend the control, but to make sure that it's not over control. Like I have clients that come in and say, hey, I don't want the kids to get the money till they graduate college. And I have to always say to them, well, I understand that's a laudable goal. Or the worst one is till they're ready for it. And I'm like, well, we can't use that as a standard because we don't know
Hmm.
what that looks like. And you're leaving that's too vulnerable and you're, ripe for litigation. But let's look at ages because certainly if you're over, you know, 30, hopefully, or 35, you're a lot wiser, and to circle back to the college thing, you know, look, I went to college, I went to law school. I think I'm very, I think it's a very good thing to do. But I also recognize people can be successful without it, or they can go in the military. It can
Hmm.
be so you don't want to pigeonhole anybody.
Not to create a picture of doom here, but can you share a situation that you were involved in, or you heard of, where things didn't go the way that the party with the assets wanted because they didn't finalize things, or there was loopholes that they didn't realize? Maybe they went online and did one of those legal document portals. Anything that you can think of?
So there was a case years ago where I was involved. I did not do the was not involved in the drafting, but a couple was killed in a car accident tragically, and they died. Mom and dad died together. Documents were not in place. I think they had actually gotten one of those things where they had gotten the drafts to review, and they just hadn't put pen to paper. And what happened? They left three kids that were, I think, mid teenagers to like under 10. And they had to, there was an argument over who was going to be the guardian, who was going to raise the children.
Mm,
And this is all happening, the guardianship's happening quickly because we have to make sure the kids have some place to be and somebody to take care of them, and, there's an, fight among the family members where the kids are dealing with the death of their parents. So that's horrible. And then the money went out to each of the kids when they were 18. And I think my understanding was when the oldest kid got the money, it was pretty significant money. And I don't think that there was any left by the time he was 19 or 20. And there was nothing anybody could do,
mm,
and so it was a tale, it was a typical tale of what can go wrong.
wow.
Yeah.
um, Illustrates what we've been talking about. What else
Yeah.
do you want everybody to know about planning scenarios? We talked about second marriages, kids. What else? What other changes in life might
Well,
we want to be aware of?
I think the other part is then when you get to have adult children, sort of that's the other big change you're going to have where you're going to say, okay, now maybe I don't need the trust. My kids are, you know, they're settled in life. They seem to be, moving forward and they seem to be, handling things well. And so then you can basically make changes and basically distribute everything outright. And outright is we divide everything up and we just, pass the money or the property to the kids. Um, but sometimes even with adult children, you have issues that arise. And I believe all the time, I tell clients, I believe in equal but unequal treatment. So what I mean by that is say you have three children and two are grounded and they're successful or whatever. And the third one is, maybe it's not that he or she is not successful but they have a bad marriage or they are at loose ends or God, they have something worse like a drug problem or something like that. And you might say, well, I want my kids to share equally. But here's where the unequal part comes in. You can say the first two can have their money outright. We're not put strings on it. But the third child, we're going to recognize that giving him or her the money isn't the best possible thing. And then we're going to put that money in trust for that child's benefit. Somebody's managing the money for him, making sure that the bills are paid. He or she has a place to live,
Hmm,
that and controlling it. So like if they have a drug problem, they're not getting additional funds to, possibly seriously harm themselves. And
sure.
then, but everybody's getting the same amount of money. It's just being treated somewhat differently.
That in itself seems like a challenge. Picking that guardian for a
Yeah.
child who is older. I mean, there's a lot of responsibility on that person's shoulders.
And that is sort of the toughest part is do you make it one of, the siblings, because then not only is it the responsibility, but it's the tension of, hey, I am now like handling the money.
Yeah,
I'm the parent of my sibling. And that can be hard. And I mean, sometimes you have it in a family where they're like, well, I don't, one of the siblings says, I don't care. I'll take care of it. I got no problem. And then I always tell them too, well, you're not doing this in a vacuum. You can call a lawyer, you can call me. And if you really don't want to give them money, I'll say no. And you just tell them your lawyer said so.
mm.
I mean, that's a little flip, but we can work together with legal reasons why he or she shouldn't get the money.
With this whole process, will, trust, how long does it typically take, from start to finish? On average, not everybody has all their paperwork and information together at that time. A lot of times when you get together, but what's the time frame?
Well, so I try to do it like, I try my best to get everything out 3 to 4 weeks, but we have a meeting where we sit down and we talk, and maybe it's, usually that lasts about an hour. We get together, talk about stuff. Then I draft the documents and send it to the client so they can review it, so they can look at it, get a feel for how everything fit together. Because I think, the discussion is very intangible. Talking about all these documents, when you see it in paper, it tends to spark questions, spark changes, like, oh, Steve wasn't the right guy to put in charge or whatever. And then we make those changes. Then we get back together to sign the documents. And that's sort of up to the client when they come back in.
Where should one keep all their paperwork? These documents, birth certificates, all of that. We hear all different things. Safe deposit box, get a safe at home that's fireproof, all of that. What's your recommendation?
So I don't really recommend a safe deposit box for your will, because the problem is that if your will is in there, and even if you're married and you both are on the safe deposit box and you both die, the kids cannot get into the safe deposit box to access the will. So it's better, I think. I keep documents for clients like wills. I think other attorneys do. Some people, if clients have like a fireproof safe at home, they keep their documents there. So I just recommend it's kept. Two things I recommend: someplace fireproof, and that the backup, your children or whoever's your backup fiduciaries, know where the documents are being kept, so that when you die, they don't have to go on the great will hunt looking for Steve's will.
And with today's technology, so many things living in a cloud.
Yeah.
What about that? And is that legal binding?
Well, so the Register of Wills, like in Maryland, they still want the paper will. So we have to produce the original. Now, if we have a copy because the original got lost and we're pulling one down off the cloud, we can file that. We have to take a couple of extra steps to get it in, but we can do that. What I do recommend with other documents, you're talking about like a living will or a medical directive, I think that is a good idea to have that in the cloud or electronic copy, because the one thing with that is that, let's say you have a medical emergency, not at home, but you're you're in Yellowstone hiking or something, and you're probably not going to have brought your medical directive on vacation with you, but somebody could email it up to Yellowstone for health, for your health.
Would it even make sense to, with that in mind, to put it somewhere, let's say Google Drive, whatever it is, it's free up to 15 gigs. So it's not like not like a subscription is going to run out, but do you think it's a good idea to put it there in a folder that is shared with who you want to share it with, and then they have access, passwords and everything? All right, guys, here it is. Just letting you know, keep it safe. And in the event of...
I think that's not a bad idea, because I also will send like PDFs of powers of attorney, medical directives to clients. And then, they often are sharing them with their children if they have adult children. Now, how they're doing it, whether it's a Google Drive or they're just, forwarding the email and the kids are putting it somewhere else.
Sure.
That I don't know. But, I think sharing a PDF like that is a good idea.
So you can work with people in the state of Maryland, correct?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. What's the best way to find you?
So you can visit my website, which is www.jasestatelaw.com. That's probably the easiest way to do it.
Yeah, start the conversation. It's not to scare anybody, but you never know. Life is always changing. And you're our go-to with this. Most of what we're talking about here applies to any state.
Exactly.
Yeah, but don't take chances. Julie, thank you so much for the insight.
You're
really,
welcome.
Really appreciate it.
You have a fabulous afternoon.
You too. We'll be right back.
This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.